Well, my friends, we have yet another packed week to share with you, all as we round it out with 4th of July celebrations at Starbase, Texas. It has been an exciting one. SpaceX is breaking new records as we find out more about how they are pushing forward to get back to Starship flights. Certainly a lot faster than we would have thought after these scenes a few weeks back. I've got heaps of Falcon 9 action, incredible views from above, and so much more.
Okay, Neil, we can see you coming down the ladder now.
Hey, Marcus House with you here, and as you may recall, we left off at Starbase last week after this ship stand had been moved to the launch site. We were speculating at the time that SpaceX must be going to push forward and jerry-rig this stand to have some sort of interface between a ship and the orbital launch mount at Pad 1. The idea, of course, to allow SpaceX to static fire the remaining Block 2 ships here instead of having to wait on the repairs needed to be finished first at the massive site. Unless you have been away and not watching over the past few weeks, you would know that Ship 36's static fire, let's say, didn't go to plan. Indeed, with the damage at the site, the capability to test a ship here has been knocked out of action for quite a while. So, how might they test them at Pad 1 instead? Working with Chameleon Circuit, these great renders show what we believe is happening. Static firing a ship here might sound like a bizarre idea, but this week we've got even more confirmation that this is the plan. Zooming in on this image from Shaun, we can see that they've begun taking off the lower diagonal pieces on at least 6 of the stand columns. We can see here that they may have started to add what looks like the vacuum engine supports that we usually see on the static fire stand. These are mounted and attached to the base of the nozzle extension to help reduce vibration damage during these static fires. Assuming all this does work out to be the case, that is even more confirmation that this unexpected plan is actually happening. SpaceX has also removed clamps from the hold-down arms. Now, these are what the booster sits on when on the pad. They are attached by bolts, so the process of removing these is actually a fairly easy job. This may just be typical servicing work, but may also be part of the work to prepare for this creative ship stand. Some more hardware made an appearance on Thursday, and take a look at these. These huge diagonal legs being worked on look like they will be attached to the now flat part of the pillars on the transport stand. Given how wide these are, this will make the lower diameter of the stand wider than the inner diameter of the mount. Based on that, it doesn't look like this part of the stand will be bolted to the inner hold-down clamps like we initially thought they may do. Instead, they are probably mounting it right to the top of the deck. That doesn't mean that they won't also add something underneath to hook up to the clamps for even more support, but we'll just need to wait to see how that evolves. What they do next really depends on how simple or complex SpaceX wants to make this stand. Remember that along with Ship 37, there is only the one remaining Ship 38 that needs a static fire. That is it for the Block 2 vehicles, so by then they'll hopefully have masses fixed and upgraded to static fire the next generation Block 3s. The bigger question in all of our minds is how they're going to load the ship for a static fire when mounted on Pad 1. The quick disconnect system that supplies all of the commodities into a ship is obviously very different to a booster. After all, the volumes and the pressures for the tank requirements are quite different. Well, they seemed to be getting started working on these challenges earlier in the week because SpaceX was busy here for quite some time testing out the tank farm. At one point, the launch mount was venting what appears to be cryogenic liquid, and the subchillers were also in action. Just think about the propellant pump speeds needed for Super Heavy versus a much shorter Starship, or even how they need to cool the propellant in the subchillers. Yes, the ship would certainly need a slower flow rate, and that could mean that the subchillers would cool the propellant down too much with its existing configuration. There's a lot to think about, but hopefully they can program and adjust a lot of the systems quite quickly. After a few hours, the venting here had stopped, so hopefully they are making some big milestones in this area. So at this point, there is a load of debate about how SpaceX will jerry-rig up a ship quick disconnect system to either interface with the booster quick disconnect or run around it entirely. I just don't see enough evidence at this point to be sure how they are going to do that, but stay tuned. It's certainly a very SpaceX thing to try to do to keep the launch frequency moving. Now last week you might remember that SpaceX had moved a hot staging ring out of the Star Factory and into Mega Bay 1, seemingly for installation on Booster 16. Given this happened not long after Ship 36 blew up, this was quite a surprising move. Well, plot twist again, because this week it was heading out of the bay and right back into the Star Factory. Over at the production site, the Gigabay work is continuing along rapidly as well. The team has now added so much gravel that it is almost at the height of the sheet piles. With all of the rain earlier in the week, it temporarily wasn't a bay but more of a giga pond. Thankfully, the next day most of that was gone, so again, work could continue. One intriguing point is that we've now also seen this modular transporter loaded with counterweights being manoeuvred onto the Gigabay Foundation work, and the counterweights were temporarily placed onto test mats. We think SpaceX was doing some sort of load-bearing test of the new gravel surface to simply ensure that it is strong enough to handle the pile drilling machines and other heavy equipment needed for the next stage of the Foundation work. Moving further south to the Sanchez site, Shaun was here on Monday as SpaceX shipped out the top ridge part for another flame trench. Remember, they have already engineered and installed the same component onto the flame trench at Pad 2, so this is definitely not for this site. No, this one has been worked on at the Sanchez area to support another Starship flame trench. Yes, if you caught the flyover organised with Greg Scott last week, this is the only other Starship pad with a flame trench in progress, so this is very likely heading off to Florida for the rapidly developing Starship launch tower at Launch Complex 39A. Some great close-ups showing the increasing number of holes for the water to spray from at the top and the centre of the ridge. Given that this literally splits the hellish exhaust of 33 Raptor engines at full thrust directly above it, this edge will need to survive the highest heat and pressure, more than any other location in the flame trench. Thanks for all your great comments about the work that Shaun is doing with us, by the way. He's been working with me for well over a year now, and he just wanted me to say a big thank you to you for being subscribed here and supporting what we do. For him, this has been a dream job, so the whole team is grateful every week that we get to do this. Okay, so what about the work going on to prepare for the next generation vehicles at Pad 2? This week, SpaceX kept motoring along, installing more hold-down arms inside the launch mount. Over the weekend, shout out to the Lab Padre team who caught some of these rolling into the site on Rover 2 cam. Following that, Nerdle cam was there catching those being lifted in as well. A few days later, it looks like all 16 clamps had been installed, but remember, the entire launch mount had rolled to the site to be installed with 4 arms already integrated at the Sanchez area. So yeah, that means that now the full complement of 20 clamp arms are installed, so another great milestone to tick off for the new pad. On Wednesday, part of the hood for the liquid oxygen booster quick disconnect was lifted up onto the gantry there. Early Thursday morning, the second part was lifted to join it. Other parts of the quick disconnect hood remain at the Sanchez site, with the 2 quick disconnect frames still sitting there. These should move to the launch site pretty soon based on all that activity. Now, before we head to Florida for a few neat updates at the Cape, it is worth noting that there aren't really any notable updates to share at Massey's. The test tank is still there, but we haven't seen much activity going on. This, of course, is likely due to investigation work on the Ship 36 mishap. After all, they don't want any evidence going missing by mistake from an active worksite if part of this is still quite a mystery. SpaceX has posted frustration just recently, saying that their attempts to recover important debris have been hindered by unauthorised parties trespassing on the obviously private property. This was all in response to what they saw as a hit piece from Bloomberg. With all the news lately on SpaceX's Ship 36 explosion, there has been a minefield of different headlines. You would have seen the SpaceX Starship prototype explodes during static fire test at Texas Starbase style articles popping up all over the place, but depending on where you read about it, the story might sound completely different. Just look here, there are well over 500 sources just on this one story alone, split quite evenly right around the entire industry. Follow along at ground.news/Marcus. Some outlets focused on the dramatic fireball and the damage to the test equipment, as you would expect. Others were very quick, though, to claim SpaceX were destroying biodiversity in the area. Indeed, some of these organisations are pretty quick to claim a lot without any information, all to gain clicks. We saw no shortage of ridiculous claims of sabotage and stuff like that, so how can you get a good understanding of the real impact? That's where Ground News is so useful. They gather articles from thousands of sources and let you compare how different outlets are framing the same event. That means that you can get a clear picture of the facts, the context, and the potential bias involved. It doesn't matter if it's a fiery Starship mishap, a political decision, or the latest tech breakthrough. If you're like me and follow stories like this closely, Ground News makes it so much easier to cut through the noise and see what's actually happening. I've been using their Vantage plan to get a clearer picture, and hey, don't just take my word for it. The Nobel Peace Centre even praised it as an excellent way to stay informed, avoid echo chambers, and expand your worldview. Right now, you can grab the same plan that I'm using for just $5 a month at ground.news/Marcus. The link is in the description, or you can just scan the QR code there on screen. That's almost 50% off, which is a pretty sweet deal, especially if you are sick of biased reporting and want a more balanced, big picture view of the news. Thank you, Ground News. Okay, so heading over quickly to the Cape, here were crews lifting up what looks to be some sort of chain on Wednesday at Launch Complex 39A. What would that be for, you may ask? Well, this will be the cable chain that shields various electrical cables and hydraulic lines that runs up to the arms to support different systems. If we compare this to Starbase as an example, that's the chain at Pad 2 neatly tucked behind the pillar with the wiring and hoses visible. Sure enough, down came that crane after installing the chain in the same place that we've seen on both Pad 1 and 2. This should mean that we will be seeing these arms performing tower climbing tests in the near future. A bunch of Falcon 9 action, of course. The MTG S1 mission launched on Tuesday afternoon from Pad 39A. This was the 500th Falcon 9 mission specifically. Now, the issue I tend to have with milestones like this is that we tend to hear them several times, so they can get a little confusing. If you're not keeping track, a few weeks back we had heard the call out for the 500th Falcon flight, which includes Falcon Heavy and I think the Falcon 1, but this was the 500th Falcon 9. Wonderful view through the ascent, and look at the scene at stage separation. I never get tired of those daylight flights. Fairing jettison there, and this payload is the Meteosat 3rd generation sounder. It is all for Europe's weather forecasting capability, and it carries an infrared sounder that will help generate 3D temperature and humidity profiles every 30 minutes from its geostationary location over Europe. Along with that, it has Sentinel-4 to monitor air quality and pollution hourly, so there's a lot of investment worldwide into having more useful data. It is especially useful, obviously, to help forecasting and have faster warnings for flash floods and severe storms. The first data from this is expected in about a year, and this is only satellite 2 out of the 6 to be launched. Of course, while that was still on its way to orbit, Booster 1085 was heading in for its 9th landing, and Just Read the Instructions was right there as the platform for yet another textbook mission. 27 minutes in, there was the second burn to boost it into the geostationary transfer orbit, and just minutes later there was the gorgeous deployment. So we just had 2 Starlink launches for the week, which seemed oddly quiet, even though compared to the rest of the launch industry it is certainly not so. More importantly though, a brand new record has been broken. We had the Group 15-7 mission off shortly after my video went live last week on Saturday morning from, you guessed it, Vandenberg Space Force Base. After breaking that thick fog layer, we could finally see Booster 1088 pushing another batch out of the atmosphere on its 8th flight. We were a good 6 kilometers or so in altitude before we could even see anything other than that cloud below. A stack of 26 satellites on this one, and moments later, Of Course I Still Love You was the drone ship in play, as is always the case from California. Look at it appearing out of the cloud like some sort of ghost ship. Beautifully smooth signal for that one too. Now next up was a flight in the darkness launching first thing in the early hours of Wednesday morning from the Cape's Space Launch Complex 40. Booster 1067 here is the record reuse holder and has remained so for quite some time now, so I was watching this one like a hawk. This, my friends, was flight 29, with this one having last flown back in May on another Starlink mission. It's almost unfortunate that this is all frosted up, covering the black coating from its now extensive launch history. Kind of hides the character, so we need to wait for it to return home before we can really take it all in. Just look at all of the missions that this one has launched. 18 of them are Starlink, but also Dragon missions for CRS-22 and Crew 3 and 4, then loads of other commercial customers too. stage separation there, and a batch of 27 Starlink satellites at fairing jettison. The big question, would we see the successful 29th recovery for the first time ever? For this one, it was a shortfall of Gravitas having the privilege of being the platform below, and there we go, check that out. Another record for SpaceX with booster 1067 now just one flight away from 30 missions. How about that? Now, early Sunday morning, a big mission for JAXA, they launched their last ever H-IIA rocket. Yes, Japan has now, after all this time, retired the entire H-2 rocket family. This has been a super reliable workhorse for over 2.5 decades now. The H-IIA specifically was the successor to the H-2 rocket, which was of course Japan's first fully domestically developed orbital class rocket, but it came with a really hefty price tag for each launch. That was quickly discontinued after just 5 flights to make way for what came next. JAXA with Mitsubishi Heavy Industries had the H-IIA built upon the H-2 design, but with better engines, and they were essentially able to cut the rocket cost in half, which was a huge deal. In 2001, that flew its maiden mission and in no time became Japan's most trusted launch vehicle. Here we are, 24 years later, and 50 missions in total with just one failure. Early on, back in 2003, a solid rocket booster malfunction during the jettison ended this one, but the rocket has had an unbroken streak of success over the past 2 decades. This last mission here was taking GOSAT into orbit, which is an environmental research satellite. It is the 3rd mission in the GOSAT series developed by JAXA. Jettison of the solid boosters there, if you can make those out through the shaky camera tracking. This leaves the first stage to separate about 6.5 minutes in, where the second stage takes over. So yes, GOSAT is armed with instruments to monitor carbon, methane and other greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. This data is crucial for tracking emissions, but also includes instruments to monitor vegetation. On board, there is even a microwave radiometer that observes the water cycle. It is all to accurately understand the climate and how feedback loops between carbon and water systems work. Unfortunately, we didn't get to see any footage of the second stage or the payload, but the satellite was successfully deployed, completing the 50th and last H-IIA mission. The H-IIA could be configured in a number of ways with the solids. Most of the time we see it just with the 2, but sometimes with 4, like the Inmarsat 6 mission in 2021. Going way back though, they used to strap on the American Castor boosters along with these SRBs. Moving forward, the H-3 can be flown with 2 or 4 SRBs as well, but also none if it is a small enough payload. Even though the cost of the H-IIA was much cheaper than the initial H-2, the launch cost was still up there around $90 to $100 million, I believe, and that is just for sending between 10 to 15 tons to orbit. That certainly seems expensive these days, especially with SpaceX soaking up the world's launch contracts with Falcon. With the switch to the H-3, the price tag seems to be around half the cost again, all while having a slightly larger payload capability of around 16.5 tons to low Earth orbit. Launch costs probably need to decrease further to truly be competitive with SpaceX, but with it still being completely expendable, it is hard to beat Falcon 9. So we've got a bunch of International Space Station updates for you too. On Thursday, the Progress MS-31 mission was launched for the station's next resupply. About 2 days it needs to spend before it will be arriving to dock with the station. That should happen just hours after this video goes live actually. Indeed, the crew up there will be waiting on all their important supplies. They need them of course so they can keep providing incredible views of phenomena like this, which we can only see from their vantage point. Nicole Ayres, the pilot of Crew 10, posted out this incredible shot of a sprite, more technically known as transient luminous events. These occur because of the intense electrical activity in the thunderstorms below. Shot of the week right there. Speaking of awesome imagery, take a look at this image of the station taken by one of Maxar's Worldview Legion satellites. Here's one they grabbed of the Chinese space station to go with it. I'm amazed by how good their imaging technology is for objects in orbit. They've got a bunch of neat examples to flick through, and they each show the resolution or the space sample distance for easy reference. Here is an image of a Starlink satellite at a resolution of 10.7 centimeters, the H-IIA rockets fairing at a crazy 2.6, and a series of increasing resolution shots of Landsat 8. How cool is that? Of course, the story that got everybody's attention this week was the third ever interstellar object that we've discovered in our solar system, and very clearly the fastest. It is very creatively named 3I/Atlas after the telescope that helped find it. This is a comet that is going to pass by the Mars orbit in the next couple of months and then head back out of the solar system, passing by Jupiter. The extremely high velocity that they've measured makes it very clear that this is an interstellar object. It is moving at a staggering 61 kilometers per second, or 221,000 kilometers per hour relative to us. It will get faster too as it continues to be pulled in by the sun. Unfortunately, we won't get a clear seat to witness it very closely from Earth because we will be on the other side of the sun at its closest approach. So just as we were exporting our last video out, Rocket Lab was back launching the Symphony in the Stars mission. The most awesome thing about this was that this was their second mission in just under 48 hours. Some more sweet sounds from that stage separation. Also a glimpse of the payload at fairing jettison, but this mission was sadly classified, so we don't have much information about the purpose of this one. This was deployed around 55 minutes into the mission. I think this was a really neat milestone for Rocket Lab. This was the quickest turnaround from this launch complex, the 4th mission just for June, and the 10th launch already this year. Just a quick side note, they posted this the other day. Can you believe it has been 3 years since the capstone mission? I thought they had a typo in that post at first, but no. Where in the world did that time go? This was an absolutely epic mission for them, given it was the first spacecraft to ever enter that unique NRHO orbit. They already have quite the legacy behind them. Also, if you want to explore the Rutherford engine used on Electron, they had a brilliant model of it here before the launch. I'm not sure if they've shared exactly this before, but it was a beautiful way to understand the complexity packed into each of those small electric pump-fed engines. They sure do pack a punch, given that they are only about 1/4 of a metre wide, just under 10 inches, and they put out 5,500 pounds of thrust. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to hit subscribe so we get to keep making them. If you want to continue with more space goodness, check out this video here next, or maybe these videos. Thanks for watching all this way through, that helps a huge amount, and I will see you all for a very big video next week.